University, to our dear friends from the Diaspora who are here as part of the uh, 75th No India program being organized by the Ministry of External Affairs. We are so grateful to the MEA for partnering with us and for making this happen. And it's a mutual learning initiative because for us at the Jindal India Institute, um, the diaspora matters a lot. We have a very ambitious agenda at the Jindal India Institute to promote the soft power of India to international audiences. But you are most special among international audiences because you are also Indians. So the diaspora is international for us in one sense because you are spread out across the world and you are like our amplifiers and can spread the message about India's greatness, a small glimpse of which we just saw. But you're also here at home for us, so and close to our hearts. So we have made diaspora engagement a very important pillar of the India Institute's outreach and activities. And your visit here is one of the first major joint things we are doing with the MEA on diaspora affairs, and we hope to continue and do many more in an institutionalized partnership. Let me also mention that this is a critical time for India because our Prime Minister, Honorable Narendra Modi ji, calls it the Amrit Kaal. You must have heard this term. It's a term which is difficult for to translate to English, but essentially the next 25 years until the centenary of India's independence of 2047 are supposed to be the most crucial make or break years or decades or 2 decades and a half that will determine not only the future of this vast country with 1.5 billion people, but also the future of the world. So in this Amrit Kaal, the priorities there are twofold primarily. Number one is to make this country a developed nation by 2047, meaning a country with high per capita income. We are still considered a low/middle income country as per the per capita income. And although India has now become the 5th largest economy in the world and is well on course to become the 3rd largest in the world in GDP, in total economic size, in per capita income terms, we're still a long way to go. So that is one of the major goalposts for this Amrit Kaal. And for India's development, the diaspora is going to be very critical. I'll come to that in a moment. The second goal for the Amrit Kaal is for India to be a leading power in the world in international affairs. And here we are consciously using a term called leading power as opposed to great power or superpower. And the reason for that is India is a country which has experienced, as you know, centuries of colonialism and subjugation. And there is a degree of reluctance in our diplomacy and foreign policy to want to be seen to be one more of those great powers or superpowers that used force and conquest and imperial domination to become great or to be a superpower. So this phrase "leading power" has been coined by the Narendra Modi administration to try and convey that India is a different type of power, and even when it becomes equal to China and the United States and is universally considered a great power or superpower, it will still want to be called as a leading power or something different from the norm of major powers and something different. So what is that something different? That's something I'll come to in a bit. So these are the two big goalposts: to be a developed country and to be a leading power, economics and in politics. Yeah. And to achieve these two ends, we need the diaspora. And there is just no question of India becoming a leading power or a developed country without the contributions, the involvement, the support and the backing of the diaspora. And that's why the diaspora engagement has become so big and so central to our foreign policy. There is a realization at the highest levels in the country and also at the level of ordinary people, that the diaspora is our greatest asset, and that the diaspora is what we really need for our influence, for our economic growth, and for our soft power to spread worldwide. You are, in many ways, the carriers of the greatness of India into every corner of the world. So you are able to, you are the vectors in that sense. And so we engage with you with a clear purpose. It's not just the, the civilizational bond and the emotional connect and the culture and the fact that we are ethnically one civilization, all of us, wherever we are Indians. It's much more than that. It's also part of our formal foreign policy strategy and diplomacy. And I'd like you to understand that, so that that you are part of a grander purpose. You're all serving something bigger. We have a bigger cause, of which you are all, willing players, foot soldiers for India's rise. That's how we see it, as strategic assets. And that should also give you a sense of greater self-importance. Because while you represent so many countries and you come with your own specific and peculiar interests and connections with India, the way we see you all is that you are our strategic assets, our force multipliers. And how is that? I'll come to that in a moment. But the big picture is that the diaspora matters so much more to us today than even 10 years ago. Before Mr. Modi came to power, there was a view that, well, the diaspora are, looking out for themselves, and we can't interfere in their internal affairs in those countries, and they chose to go wherever they went to, or their ancestors went to, and whatever happens to them is maybe marginally of interest to us. And within the diaspora, this 33 million that we generally count, there are different categories, and some of you are also from different categories. We have the nearest to, or the most recent ones are what we call the NRIs, or the non-resident Indians. They're still Indian passport holders, right? They're not foreign citizens. And so those are people who have left India but only recently and haven't taken citizenship elsewhere. Then there are the broader category of the PIOs, the persons of Indian origin, or now we are calling them OCI, overseas citizens of India, right? So, and we have dual citizenship now. These are major reforms that have happened that enable us to make the claim that we have 33 million in the diaspora. So NRI, PIO, OCI, you have to add them all up, and that's how we reach this magic figure of approximately 33 or maybe 34 million or so. And what we have realized, especially in the Modi era, is that if we neglect, or if we sideline or marginalize or simply ignore the diaspora, we are going to miss out on one major pillar of our rise. So it's only going to happen if the diaspora is walking along with us. And in many ways, the diaspora is carrying our pride and prestige and our reputation on its shoulders. So that's why I call you all our cultural ambassadors, or de facto ambassadors. So the diaspora's importance has grown in our strategy, and the diaspora is today also responding. In some countries, the diaspora does some very, very obvious things for our national interests. I'll give you the example of the US. We don't have a representative in this group from the US. It's more than 4.2 or 4.3 million now in the United States, people of Indian origin, one of the largest concentrations. And in the US, our diaspora is not only economically thriving and prosperous, but also does lobbying for us, on very crucial foreign policy matters. For example, the nuclear deal that we did with the United States in 2006 and 2007 was shepherded by the intense lobbying and the mobilization efforts of the Indian diaspora there. There are many other examples where India's national security interests and major economic deals, all these are being done because of the lobbying and the active participation and push being given by the diaspora. And one of the things we have done from our side here in Delhi is to mobilize the diaspora to be politically active in their respective countries, for themselves and also on behalf of Indian national interests. And this has become quite organized. Many times you may have heard people compare the Indian diaspora with the Jewish diaspora in the US, who are very organized and who do a lot for Israel's interests, for example, right? Or the Chinese diaspora in many parts of the world, who are, I'll come to the comparison between the Indian and Chinese diaspora, but they are also very large and numerous, and they do a lot of things for Chinese national interests in their countries of domicile. So Indian diaspora, we are more diverse than diasporas of, let's say, of Israel or of China. But one effort has been from our side to try and coalesce and bring them all together as Indians when you are abroad or when you are living overseas, rather than as Gujaratis or Tamils or Kannadas or people from UP or Bihar, right? So one of the things we have been trying to do is to bring the associations and the diaspora institutions into larger frameworks. Meaning, in many of your countries, and you know this, you're quite familiar with this, on linguistic and regional, religious or other identity grounds, Indian diaspora is often scattered into smaller subgroups, right? The other day, when on my TV show, when you were there, we were talking about North Indians and South Indians in the diaspora and how they have separate associations and temples and mosques and so on. So one of our efforts, as big efforts in the last 10 years, has been to make it a kind of like a unified front wherever you are, and to create some kind of a consciousness that when we are abroad or when we are in your countries of domicile, we are all Indians first, and Gujaratis or Tamils or Keralites or Bengalis later. Yeah. So that has been one effort, and it's continuing. It's a continuous work in progress. Our missions abroad, and also the ministry, and also the overseas friends of BJP, the ruling party in India, they have all been involved in these things to try and reduce the disparities among our communities around the world, and to make them stand on one platform. And second, of course, political empowerment. We just had an election in the UK, and Rishi Sunak's party lost. You must have all followed it. But he was prime minister for nearly 2 years, and he's, of course, of Indian origin. And when he became prime minister, I remember 2 years ago, it was a big deal in India because he's from the diaspora. And he became prime minister of a country which is no longer a great power. But it was, many people said it's poetic justice because Britain had colonized India for centuries, and here is a brown man who's become prime minister of the United Kingdom. Symbolically, it was as big as Barack Obama becoming president of the United States from the point of view of people of African origin. So Rishi Sunak, of course, is now leader of opposition, and they have lost. But what I'm trying to say, and many of you come from countries where heads of state and government have been or still are of Indian origin. So at that level, it really helps us with this strategy that I'm talking about. The fact that we have foreign ministers or prime ministers or presidents or vice presidents of Indian origin makes a huge difference. Some people say, well, it's just symbolic and we just own them and we claim them, but actually they belong to the countries they represent and they represent their interests and they will not do much for us. But my own view, and from what I've heard, is many of the obstacles to advancing strategic partnerships of India are overcome because we have diaspora people in high-ranking positions in government in many countries. Today you'll hear from my colleague, Professor Hasib Mohammed, who's actually of Indian origin from Trinidad and was in the Trinidad Foreign Service. He's a diplomat. And there are many such examples, right, in business, in politics, in arts and culture, where the diaspora have done extraordinarily well as professionals. And it helps us because they're a very influential group in most countries. And again, people compare them to Jewish diaspora because of that reason. But what I'm trying to say is that their success has enabled us to pursue our strategic goals. And That also translate into economic opportunities. Um, there's here the comparison with the Chinese diaspora is often instructive, because the Chinese diaspora have actually invested a lot back in mainland China and in Hong Kong, and the figures are staggering. So if you're a rich person, but you're based in Europe or somewhere, or in Africa, or the Middle East, and you're of Chinese origin, you reinvest back in mainland China in billions. Yeah, and you partake in China's economic miracle and growth. And today, China is a middle-income country. It's not a developing country anymore. And it all happened in the span of 25 to 30 years maximum. I think the last I saw, the per capita income of China is already 13 or 14,000 US dollars, which is, as per the IMF and World Bank criteria, it's already a middle income country. So I'll come to the downside of the Chinese diaspora and how we are different from them. But what I'm trying to say is, there is also a great expectation in India that the diaspora will give back to us in more concrete ways, especially the more senior, accomplished people who are in private sector and entrepreneurship and business, that they'll come back and invest in India in a big way and be part of the Make in India miracle and the initiatives of the current government to make manufacturing boom through foreign direct investment and all that. So the diaspora comes in there as well. The remittances are phenomenal. If you look at the Gulf countries, the kind of remittances that come from there, back here, from the UAE, from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, these are actually more like the NRI category. Because, the Gulf countries, they don't offer citizenship. They're like temporary workers who go from India for a few years or a few decades, and they remit a lot of money back to their relatives here. And this runs into billions of dollars every year. And India is the largest inward remittances in the world, because of the diaspora and the connections back home. So in both FDI and remittances, diaspora are hugely relevant for our economic growth. And like we were discussing on the TV show the other day on Doordarshan, the diaspora also generates these transnational business linkages. Many of you are familiar with what I'm talking about. If you are a business person in South Africa and you have a better cultural understanding of India, okay, right, than, let's say, somebody from the black community in South Africa, or the white minority community in South Africa, you have this cultural knowledge and understanding, and you have a deeper business intelligence about India than your fellow South Africans from other ethnic groups or communities, right? So you will be able to actually leverage the contacts better, travel to India, go back, set up the joint ventures, and make the two-way trade possible, and make two-way investment flows possible. And you better understand the labor regulations and the psyche, the mentality of of work and attitudes toward work in different parts of India. You'll be better able to assess where to invest if you're planning a big investment in India, right? I'm just giving you one example. The same goes with the Gulf countries. The UAE is our top strategic partner today. It wasn't that way even 10 years ago. But now the Emirates has come up, and we have a huge diaspora there. If I'm not wrong, again, more than 3 million just in the UAE, right? It may even overtake the US in numbers in time to come. And by the way, that's like 1/3 of the total population of the Emirates is of Indian origin, and so hugely influential. But we have big conglomerates there that enable the two-way commerce and trade to happen. So that's another way in which the diaspora is enabling free trade agreements, like with the UAE, with Australia, with these kind of countries. We are able to go forward because of the pivotal role being played by the diaspora. And the free trade agreements are win-win situations where both countries involved gain, and it adds to the larger goal of creating a developed country by 2047. So both in terms of political lobbying and in terms of economic exchanges and flows, the diaspora is very critical for us. And that's why I said you are strategic assets for us, It might sound a little bit instrumental, what I'm saying, like we are using you, but let me come to how you benefit from India as well, right? Now, it's not, that's why I'm calling it a two-way win-win partnership between us and the diaspora. Uh, my reading, and I'd like you all to come in also on this. We were discussing this in the TV show the other day. My reading is that as India becomes a developed country and as it becomes a leading power in the world, it will enhance your status and prestige in your respective countries. Because you can hold your head high and tell people that I come from a country which is actually making rapid strides in the world. Not a country that is quote unquote poor and backward and mired in superstitions, or the land of the bullock cart and of the snake charmers. Right? That is the stereotype of India. Those who are caught in a time warp are still talking about that India. Right? But we put a spacecraft on the on the surface of the moon, which no other country has been able to do so. Right? So when we did the Chandrayaan, the lunar mission, for example, the whole world sat up, and I'm pretty sure you in the diaspora felt a special sense of pride and achievement when we did that. So, in fact, Prime Minister Modi, when he was in Madison Square Garden, just after his inauguration, first term in 2014, I remember, he gave a very striking analogy to the diaspora audience in New York, in a giant stadium. And he said, we used to be, and for those of you who know Hindi, he says, "Pehle hum सांप से खेलते, अब हम mouse से खेलते हैं." What he meant to mean was that, the notion that India is stuck in centuries of slavery and servitude and backwardness is associated with the snake charmer, trope. And now the mouse, he's not talking about the animal mouse, but the computer keyboard mouse, right? So that's a big transformation that's happened in this country, and our software and IT and services industry have really boomed. They're driving a lot of the growth, and also the changing impressions. Nowadays, even the Hollywood movie makers make sure that when they show the IT programmers or the ones who are breaking the codes, they usually brown and look like Indians, right? Because that's what they know now. So that transformation, the infrastructure upgrades, the economic growth, the technology, the science, all these are also part of India. It's not only the land of the great major world religions, it's also the contemporary democracy, the success of the democracy, the fairness and the freeness of our elections, and the science and technology, the advancements, which we are doing at a very frugal cost. It's not only the lunar mission, friends. The other day, I was hearing our IT minister, Ashwini Vaishnav, and he was saying that most of the G20 countries are asking India to help them with the rollout for digital payments and for the 5G and 6G telecom networks. So these are some of the areas in which we have got the prowess, and we've got the know-how, the brain power, and also have the capacity to transfer the skills and the technology to our partners abroad, including in the diaspora countries. So if you look at the larger G77 grouping in the United Nations, it has now almost 130 countries or more. It was just known as G77 due to a historical reason. But today it's 130 plus countries, what we call global south mostly. A lot of them are looking up to India for inspiration and to borrow ideas and technology and know-how. So these things are all means by which I believe you and your countries are also being empowered. And it's easier for us to operate in diaspora countries where there are large diasporas, because already there's like a open door for us, as opposed to countries where we don't have significant presence. So Malaysia, Singapore, East Asia, in Southeast Asia, we have one big hub, and in the Pacific Islands, then we have one in the Gulf countries, then we have one in Southern and Eastern Africa, South Africa, Uganda, Tanzania, and so on. And then we have one big hub in continental Europe, one in the United Kingdom, and then one, of course, in North America, in the US and Canada. These are the big clusters of our diaspora presence. And in all these countries, we have major strategic partnerships. I forgot to mention Australia and the Oceania as a whole, where also we have presence. So if you look at it, in all these countries, we find that the diaspora is now energized and has a greater self-belief and is no longer, quote unquote, ashamed of calling themselves Indians or trying to hide their identities. That's because India is backing them from here. And two, you are just seeing the upward trajectory of India and its rise. So I believe that this is where, at a very deep self-validation or a self-realization or a self-upliftment kind of point of view, India's rise is benefiting you all. And then there are concrete opportunities, material opportunities and chances that we already spoke about, especially in economic sphere and otherwise, where we are supporting your rise. One of the things I've noticed is that because of the diaspora diplomacy, now a lot of, especially where our diaspora is in a minority in many countries, and where they have faced a lot of racism and inequalities and discrimination and even segregation in some countries. There, what is happening is that our outreach and our strategic ties with the governments of those countries also benefits our diaspora and helps raise their status, and helps even give them more rights as citizens in those countries. It helps them to climb up the ladders in their countries as a result of our outreach and our lobbying and our advocacy on your behalf. Yeah. So that's why it's a symbiotic relationship. We are not just, quote unquote, using you. We believe that you are gaining from our rise and our outreach and our diplomacy. Now, I've touched on the politics and the economics. Let me, of course, go to the other big pillar of our diaspora diplomacy, which is culture. That's, in a way, we take it for granted because, from the epics, our Ramayana and Mahabharata and so on, I mean, you have carried it to the corners of the world. In the Caribbean, I know we have friends from the Caribbean here. If you read V.S. Naipaul's A House for Mr. Biswas, for example, classic literary work, it's there, right? We know how much you have preserved the pristine traditions of India and have kept it intact, or even adapted and modified it as per your local contexts. And that gives us another entry point. And now there is a greater emphasis on how to validate your adaptations and variations and modifications of the core Indian cultural and spiritual ideas and values. So our effort has been to celebrate and to support many of these things that you do in your respective countries, which are directly relevant to our soft power and our attraction as a great civilizational state. So there also, I believe, the work of our high commissions, embassies, and also increasingly of our private sector players. You are in a university, friends, founded by Mr. Naveen Jindal, who is a member of parliament from Kurukshetra, which is not far away from here. And the name Kurukshetra should ring a bell in most of you. You know the epics, right? This is the legend where the Mahabharata, the final war is supposed to have happened. It's not far from here. And Mr. Jindal is a member of parliament from Kurukshetra, from the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party. And he actually symbolizes, because he has been present, he has got like he's a steel tycoon, and he has a presence in dozens of countries around the world, including investments in steel and power and mining and all these sectors. And he has this knack to engage with the diaspora. For example, in South Africa, our friends in South Africa, the Africa headquarters of Jindal Group is in Johannesburg. And from there, they operate in multiple countries across the continent. I've had the opportunity to travel to Mpumalanga province in the north of South Africa, and in Mozambique and in Botswana. In all these countries, Jindal Group has a huge presence. They are not seeing government of India or our diplomats there. Local people there, including our diaspora and the local black community, the majority in Africa, they are seeing Indian corporate houses on the ground. And I'll give you this personal example. I'm not saying this because I belong to a Jindal institution. So when I went and saw this gigantic mine in South Africa, close to the border with Mozambique, from the moment you arrive, the relationship between the local African and diaspora Indians and the Indian managers who've come from here and who are doing this major operation there is so cordial and so friendly and so non-hierarchical and not based on racism. And here I'll draw the parallel with the Chinese diaspora. What has happened with Chinese investments and the Belt and Road projects in many countries is that there is a huge backlash because of the racial discrimination. And many people, you must be familiar, in Kenya and Tanzania, there have been like lots of videos that have come out where the Chinese superiors are actually using racial slurs and abusing and insulting the local workers, right? So it's a very, very, and there's, because the Chinese bring in more of their workers rather than hiring local people, there's a tremendous, groundswell of anger against it. Of course, the Chinese have the money that we don't have. They invest far larger sums. They give bigger loans than what India does. So there they have an advantage. But when it comes to the basic human qualities, and probably it's also the authoritarian top-down model, the Chinese state model is also reflected in what they do with their diaspora in different parts of the world. We do it so differently. It's organic. Our private enterprises are not necessarily, following the cue of the Indian government in whatever they do in your countries. So the interface is with our businesses, with our investors, and they're hiring, they're generating jobs in your countries. They're building infrastructure in your countries. They're skilling and building capacities. All of you are part of this capacity building, pillar of the Indian government under the No India program. So there are so many ways in which India is giving to you, and you have personally benefited from it. But also, if you think about it in a larger sense, there is a massive empowerment going on of the diaspora through our efforts and our initiatives and our benevolence. So a lot of the lines of credit, for example, we give include diaspora countries, and there is conscious effort to involve them. There are also symbolic means by which we have tried to uphold your culture and your values and also your economic and other interests. We have this Pravasi Bharati Divas, the commemoration of the successes and accomplishments of the diaspora Indians from all over the world. We bring them here, and there's like a big gathering where they're given awards, and there are panels about discussing about how we can enhance the linkages. This also has really become huge. And, it is interestingly, it's also happening at the level of our embassies and high commissions on a smaller scale. So while not everybody can come here as an invitee, there are ways in which you can engage with us around the Pravasi Bharati Divas, around yoga, in the International Yoga Day, around Diwali and Holi, and so much more. And we are able to do that because of the activities being generated by our missions abroad. So that's one way also in which our artists are coming and performing in your countries, our musicians, our classical dancers, our movie makers, our sculptors. So there's a whole cultural dimension where we are able to keep the connection going with you through our initiatives. So I believe that in the process, there's also two-way learning, because the way you have adapted the original Indian culture to your countries of domicile and homelands is also something for us to appreciate and to understand, and to, in a way, fulfill our own view that our culture is very open and adaptable, not closed and rigid. So, for example, when we see the Ramayana and the way it has been, interpreted and reinterpreted and added on in many parts of the world, is just incredible. I saw one in Bali, in Indonesia, and it's very different from the Ramayana we have here. But we know the basic story, and we feel so fulfilled that it's still being upheld and is still being performed in its own way, adapted to the local conditions in Southeast Asia. So, what I'm trying to say is that on all these three counts, economics, politics, and culture, the diaspora has risen in our estimation, and we see them no longer as having abandoned or betrayed India or being traitors. I'm sorry to say this. This was the attitude that was prevalent for a long time in India about the diaspora. We are a poor and developing country, and these people are making it big abroad and are succeeding, and well, they are just traitors. It's a brain drain. That was the term that used to be used, especially for people who went in recent waves of migration after independence. You know, and we used to the common approach to the diaspora was that these people have just gone for greener pastures and have left us behind. Left us behind where we are stagnating in poverty. Now you see that whole image and the estimation of the diaspora has significantly changed. We have now this concept of no longer brain drain. We are using terms like brain gain and also circular economy. Have you heard this term? What goes around comes around. This is being used in different contexts. Like some people use it in ecology and sustainability literature. It's a circular economy. But here I'm talking about the idea that whoever is abroad and of Indian origin is not a loss for us. She's a gain for us because she's going to give back to us in some form or the other. Her activities, her wealth creation, her messaging, her conduct, all of it will redound to India's benefit. So the idea is that what goes around comes around. And so in that sense now, we also, the general public attitudes have shifted. It's not just the government level. You can see in India that people actually look up to those who go abroad. And they aspire to also go abroad. Once upon a time, the out-migration was seen as a loss of talent and a loss of know-how for India. But now, the means by which you're all coming back and engaging with us through technology, through especially the economic linkages I spoke about, the trade and investment flows, is so beneficial to India and Indians that it's no longer seen as this brain drain. So that's another big change that I hope you're also noticing while you're on the Know India program. The diaspora diplomacy is now has percolated to the level of the Indian society as a whole. We not only have relatives living abroad and who keep coming and visiting us, and it's not only us visiting them in all your countries, but it's something larger. Like we know that there's a phenomenon and that we have friends abroad, close, dependable friends and relatives abroad. A large community, all of you. So that matters, and that gives us a lot of self-confidence when we travel or when we venture out to many countries. Let me stop there and conclude by simply saying that there are intrinsic and organic ways by which the diaspora has always been linked to the Mother India. It's something very deep, and I don't think English language is even sufficient to explain the emotional connection. But the foreign policy and the diplomacy effort is to make that and to use that and to turn it into something actionable, something concrete, something at the level of strategy, and something that will advance our strategic goals, our meaning India's strategic goals and also your goals and aspirations being in the diaspora. So we have this big reservoir of goodwill and trust, right? The umbilical cord, which was never snapped. We have that. But we need to nurture it, and we need to make sure the umbilical cord, that the babies grow and become very, very influential and powerful and successful wherever they are, and that the umbilical cord will continue to give in some form or the other. The mother will continue to give. So I think the way I see it is there is an organic layer which is intrinsic by the very fact of a history and the waves of migration. We are all linked. But we need to consciously work on this. We can't just take it for granted. And that's what is being done through the diplomacy and the foreign policy. There is a strategy behind it. And Prime Minister Modi actually has changed a lot of mindsets about the diaspora here and also abroad. And, because of his background in the RSS and all that, he has always known the strategic value of the diaspora. And therefore, he has cultivated them. He's so popular abroad. I can't tell you. I mean, every time he goes overseas, it's like a spectacle for us to watch from here. Just the adoration and the support of the diaspora. And they're doing it not because they're being mobilized by anybody. It's because they have been starving for this. I was with our External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, on one of my TV shows some months ago, and he was saying, the diaspora has been waiting for something like this for a long, long, long time, for generations, where India, official India, does not look down upon them or treat them as traitors or as those who betrayed India, and who are now part of the motherland. So I think ultimately this organic layer is always there. We cannot take it for granted, and therefore we are making special efforts to cultivate and to beat it into shape, if you like, so that it becomes a force multiplier for India. And at the level of strategy, everything that you're doing, all of it should add up to something that advances our strategic goals. That's how I think we are approaching the diaspora. But like I said, it's not an exploitative type of strategy. It's an empowerment-based strategy. And I believe all of you feel stronger and more involved, more committed, and more devoted to India than before because of our strategy. If it was just, a culture and religion and spirituality, and my colleagues are going to come in and talk about those also. But I'm trying to lay out the bigger political purpose behind our diaspora diplomacy. And I believe that both our government interface and the private sector interface and all these will continue to increase. Our footprint in your countries and in your regions is going to continue to grow, because that is how India will grow, and that's how India will become a leading power in the world. Thank you so much, and happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insightful remarks. Now the floor is open to questions from all the participants. Kindly raise your hand to ask questions.
My name is Jody Modley. I'm from South Africa. So I love the mandate of India to connect with its diaspora and the status that comes with us, from India's plans to become more developed. But I think, can you highlight the key events or factors that contribute or have influenced the diaspora's migration patterns, besides things like remittance and the greener pastures that you spoke about?
So this is where, the Chinese model has often been cited, because they have reinvested a lot in the mainland and Hong Kong, as I said, and they're, wherever they're in the world, they've been able to generate resources. Like Indians, they're also entrepreneurial, and many of them naturally take to business and commerce and do well. And the Communist Party of China has mobilized them to do these things and to give back in a big way. The figures speak for themselves. So with the economic growth, I think there's one intangible area also. My colleague, Professor Naresh Singh, might know more because he's a public policy specialist. Ideas and inspiration. Also, we need more. We have something like called the Startup India. It's and digital. These are like These are government ideas to increase entrepreneurship and self-help and self-employment in India. Because, it's a vast population with a huge middle class, and the government or the private sector, organized private sector, cannot generate jobs for everybody, right? There's a youth unemployment problem. So the idea of Startup India is everybody with an idea should be able to get some seed capital and to start a small enterprise, right, at least, or a medium enterprise. And there, many of you in the diaspora are inspirational and have done it in your respective countries. And there are ways in which I think, and I think this has been discussed at the Pravasi Bharati Divas and all these things too, for transfer of ideas and inspiration through hackathons and dialogues across countries, where young people from the diaspora also engage with the young people here and jointly start new enterprises. It could be like social entrepreneurship to solve social problems, or it could be just a for-profit thing. These kind of things, I don't think have happened in a very organized or a large-scale way. But that's one more way in which you could inspire and share your stories with our young entrepreneurs, and they may be able to expand markets and find new clients and customers by teaming up with you. So we have now a Ministry of Skill Development, and there's also the Startup India initiative. All these are linked, and there are ways by which the Startup India initiative should, I think, link up with the diaspora in a more organized way, in a concrete way. That's also something that strikes me as a possibility for us to benefit from your know-how and your experiences and your connections to solve the youth unemployment issue. It is an issue in India, undeniable. Poverty levels are going down, growth is happening, but there is this large, group of young people who are coming into the job market every year, and it's not easy to absorb them. So startups are the way to solve this problem. Not everybody can be absorbed into the public sector or the big organized services or manufacturing sector. And actually, we need, of course, manufacturing in a big way. We don't yet have large-scale manufacturing in India, which can generate medium to low-skilled employment. So there are different means by which, the diaspora, if you have already started industries or manufacturing in your countries and you're doing business with India, if there is a way in which your examples can be brought in and made to help ignite our startup culture. There is a change in India. Risk-taking traditionally has been limited to some groups in India, like the Gujaratis. Mr. Modi is from Gujarat, right? Or the Marwadis. These people have been historically more inclined to taking risks and not afraid of failure. There's no, in their communities, there's no social censure of if you fail, if you try something and fail. But in most other parts of India, there is no intrinsic culture of risk-taking. They are risk-averse. They're afraid of failure, and they don't encourage young people to do startups. So in many parts of the country, people still aspire to just get a government job, a public sector job, which does not require any kind of, which will be risk-free, But I think over time, these attitudes are changing, and we will need much more with startup culture that we can get from our peers and counterparts in the diaspora. Yes.
Hi, namaskar. I'm Kivala from South Africa. I think as you were presenting, my brain was just going on or just generating lots of ideas and things that that can definitely be improved between diaspora and India. I don't think this is the right platform to engage with those ideas or to talk about them. Maybe that's a discussion for
Go ahead.
afterwards. I just found that my main question is, I know you touched on the Ministry of Skills Development now in terms of youth unemployment, but are there any other platforms that we could use to promote these ideas, to voice our ideas and things like that? I think, yeah, I've got a lot of it relates to embassies collaborating with local diasporic foundations. I find that in my experience, there's a lot of unengaged youth in our diasporic countries who could very much benefit from learning about our history in order to understand who we are, where we came from, in order to better promote where we're going. Yeah, so I mean, one of my examples is I mentioned on the TV show was featuring indentured labor in history syllabi. I think India could also perhaps provide support in terms of providing access to historians to enable diaspora to trace their ancestry, learn a bit more about India pre-indentured labor, support with digitizing archives and records of ship lists, other resources to help with ancestry learning, or even just have the embassies collab with local diasporic foundations. I know there's one in KwaZulu-Natal, the Shantik Foundation. They do a lot of community-based work, promoting the youth, promoting women, promoting Hindu culture within families. So I think with the embassies themselves collaborating with these local organizations, it could help spread more awareness. I use this as a specific example because unfortunately, prior to applying to the KIP, I wasn't aware of events that were being promoted by our local embassies until connecting with them and researching. So I feel a lot of the youth may also be just unaware of all these things like International Day of Yoga, all these events that are happening. Yeah, so I just think, you know, through connecting with local foundations, we could access a whole new population, a whole new number. Those are a few of my ideas, but
Yeah,
in
no, for
essence,
example, in
yeah.
your country, there is this 1860
Heritage Center.
Heritage Center
Yes.
run by, what's his name, Mr. Naidu,
Mr. Selvan Naidu.
Selvan Naidu.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are already keyed into the Indian government, system, and they engage with them. But you're right, probably our diaspora is so vast that we still have not reached out to all of them. What you're saying is that there are many who are not engaged yet. And of course, in their homes and in their private lives and in their friend circles, they are still part of diaspora, but they're not that linked yet to India.
Yeah.
In a very, I think, technology and online is the way, we would like to see how we can do these kind of sessions and maybe bring them into the loop through long distance seminars and workshops and we have a few departments in the country that do diaspora studies in a very specialized way at the PhD level and in the university level. But there's some food for thought for us. Maybe in the India Institute, we could do a series through online means where we have a country, let's say Uganda, and obviously there's a large diaspora, or Tanzania, let's say, there's a large diasporic community there, and there are some linkages. But if we are able to do a sustained engagement with them on a monthly basis, where they have participation from their side, we have some scholars and thinkers from our side, and we do this in a way, and we repeat this in every major cluster where we have large diaspora presence. Maybe that's one way for us to engage deeper with diaspora communities beyond the No India, because No India is still, you're like a select group who have been chosen, but there are thousands or even millions of people in the diaspora who will never be able to come on No India program, right? Because the scale is so massive. So how to keep them engaged beyond the embassy events and the high commission? I think my view is that we must do something from here through technology that will be like a chain of thought and which will continuously and repeatedly engage with the diaspora and cover and touch thousands, if not millions of them, over a period of 4 or 5 years or something. So do let us know. The India Institute, we are very keen to do such things. And if you have ideas about your communities back home and how we could, through technology, without incurring costs, financial costs, it's so easy. If they all gather in a community center, and we do like a half-day engagement with them, right from here, sitting here in our premises, and it's a very structured thing that gets them to know more about India, what's happening in India, and also what more we can do for them in their communities. Just please connect us with institutions and with communities there. Um, in Gulf countries, for example, they have Indian schools where the diaspora, the entire school, high school and middle school, they only have young people from the diaspora who go there. They don't mix necessarily with the local Arabs. And they do their own schools. So these are some avenues where we can actually directly engage with them and do things for them through technology. But on the weekends, communities come together, and we have experts and scholars on so many different issue areas here. And if your community says, we want to know about, I don't know, scientific and technological advancements in India, we can actually do a whole session for diaspora young people through technology on that with our experts. If you want to know about, economic growth in India and opportunities in India, we can doing business in India. Okay, we can bring our experts who can train young people in the diaspora on that issue. If you want to know about, the traditional things like the art and culture and spirituality and philosophy of India, we can organize sessions for you folks, at no cost. It can just be a kind of like a public service thing where we're doing it through technology. So let us know topics and themes which you feel your communities will benefit from learning. And we at the India Institute can easily help organize those. Because that way our mission is fulfilled, that we are reaching larger and larger numbers of the diaspora. Yeah, and anything else, if you want to know about our space, achievements in space launches and these kind of things, we are, for a developing country, it's like India is like a superpower. The kind of advanced space technology and satellites and rockets that we launch. If you want to know about our foreign policy, if you want to know about caste and religion in India, social issues, what's been happening, if you want to know about our democracy, if you want to know about gender and women's empowerment and inequalities and all these things, we have got the people. And if you want to organize sessions to be done with your communities, please go back and tell them that we are ready to do those and let us know, and we can organize that through online means. Yes.
Are actually reaching out. They're already organizing events based on what you're saying. Recently, Trinidad and Guyana both had events on the arrival day, where the indentured arrival came, and they had kind of like a big events. The problem is the diaspora is not connecting with the embassy. They can't go to your home and ask you to connect. They are not aware you're already present there. So the diaspora has to connect with the embassy, and all Indian missions are actually organizing several events on a regular basis to interact with the community. They have to be made aware that you exist. They don't know who all are there, who are twice the diaspora, the third or fourth generation. Again, it's if you connect with them, you will get aware what is happening. Plus, their social media handles are also have the events series. You can easily ask them for a connection, check their social media. Even our own social media now, with the recent thing, we're promoting kind of like a quiz series, which has kind of like trivias and inputs so that you can get aware what is India. So we're giving you a different kind of a quiz series also. Plus, these kinds of things are already happening. All you need to do is check their social media handles, and as Sir said, connect on the individual level also, but primarily to your embassy so that it gets more easier for you to connect to India.
I definitely think it's a two-way thing. Yeah.
Kind of, they have to be aware that you exist. Again, if they're not aware, they can't just search you and pinpoint on a Google map that you exist. So they have to be aware that you exist.
Yeah, and the point I'm making from the point of view of our university and institute is that we have intellectual manpower on different issue areas and topics where we can actually offer you keynote speakers and resource persons and all those things. So you can also bank on us and ask us, especially through remote, through online, it's very easy. Yeah, over and above the quizzes and the general connection, we could do deeper, more advanced topics on various issue areas related to India that can help spread deeper understanding. Awareness and knowledge is one thing, but how about real in-depth understanding of a topic, anything about India, I've mentioned many things, and we'll be happy to share our resources.
Thank
Yes,
you.
please. Yeah, go ahead.
So I actually have two questions. Well, one is more of a statement. I'll allow you a chance to expand.
Could you just mention your
Sorry,
country?
Keval Marimutu from Trinidad and Tobago. So you mentioned earlier that India is aspiring, obviously, considering the scale of its economy, its people, is an aspiring great power. And it's shifting away from the realist policy making, the conventional realist policy making of, say, Russia, India, China, towards it's almost economic realism and then a focus on multilateralism and global citizenry. So, and you said earlier that you touched back on the shift away from that policy, and you actually didn't go back on it. So I want to hear maybe your thoughts on that. And then the second question, which is the question, would be with countries like United States, China, Russia. Recently you see all the protests in Georgia. With countries now introducing foreign agent laws, and when prominent policymakers such as yourself talk about well, not necessarily, but almost explicitly say instrumentalization, do you think there's a chance that programs like this may result in the diaspora, persons in the diaspora almost being forced to register as foreign agents? I mean, if you look at, say, Israel and the Israeli lobby in the United States, and then you look at all the tensions in with the Israel-Palestine, there's increasing pushback against the Israel lobby, and you almost mentioned the similarities there. So I want to get your take on that.
Thank you. These are challenging questions. Yeah, are we shifting away from realism? I'm a structuralist. I have a new book coming out in September called Friends, India's Closest Strategic Partners. And what I'm arguing is that the kind of friendships and partnerships that we build abroad, including with diaspora and with governments and private sectors, is determined by our place in the international hierarchy. So India is not yet a great power or a superpower, but it has all the makings of one. It's a kind of like a great power to be, right? Or as we say, a leading power to be. So our strategy is therefore driven by our status, where we are, and where we are aspiring to be. For example, so the multilateralism and all that is there. For example, we hosted a very successful G20 presidency last year. It was huge. So we do take that role seriously, because that's one way by which we can enhance our prestige and reputation and recognition as a world leader. But we also do more, I would say, hard-nosed realpolitik. I mean, the kind of partnerships we build, many of these are aimed at countering our adversaries. So we still do that kind of more national security centric foreign policy, because we often say that out of 193 countries, are there 193 or 194 now in the UN? Yeah, you take us out, and then there are 192, I think. We only have two adversaries, and you know them very well. It's China and Pakistan, and there's nobody else that we consider an adversary. And so to push back against our adversaries, we also build defense diplomacy and military cooperation and strategic agreements with many countries. So we do the traditional realpolitik also, and our strategic culture has been changing. One of my previous books, called Crunch Time, is about how India's strategic culture has shifted in the Modi period, and we become more assertive in pushing back against adversaries that attack us or harm us. But multilateralism is there. The UN engagement, the G20, and all those forums, the South-South cooperation, Voice of the Global South. These are all signature initiatives. So we do a bit of the traditional realpolitik, but also what can be called like liberal internationalism or multilateralism. We also mix these two, and that is because of our current stature. Maybe in 10-15 years, or by the time it's 2047, I'm pretty sure we will be accepted universally as a great power or as a leading power, equal or even ahead of China and the US. So maybe at that stage we'll behave differently. I don't know. As per the theory, um, a middle power or a rising power behaves differently from a great power or a small power. So, but then we have this exceptionalism about ourselves. Just as the US has exceptionalism or China has exceptionalism, we think of ourselves as different from the rest and unique in our rise in world history. So maybe we will behave differently, and we will certainly, we often take pride in the fact that our influence has spread through monks and through, you know, mutual learning and through intellectual exchanges and debate, not through the sword, you know, not through military conquest and occupation and domination of other lands. So, will India change and become more assertive and militarily expansionist as it becomes a big power? I don't know. Our view is that culturally we will never do that. But even the Chinese have been claiming that, you know, forever, that we are different from the US, we don't exploit and we don't intervene militarily in other countries, and we just do win-win partnership. That's the Chinese rhetoric. But increasingly, you see that the Chinese are behaving in a very overbearing manner that is leading to the backlash I was talking about. So time will tell. But I think right now we've got a mix of policies, both the traditional realistic ones, and also the liberal international. Is there a danger of over instrumentalization of diaspora that will lead to problems for you all? And that will you be branded as foreign agents? I don't think so, because, you know, the nature of the Indian engagement, like I said, is more diverse. Is not all driven by the state. That's why I talked about our private entrepreneurs and our businesses. Our presence is more organic, you know, and it's not driven by just the government strategy or grand strategy. So I think that balance will always be there, and I don't foresee any of you being in trouble because you are supporters of India, you know, because we are not so pushy and we don't do it. So even though I may have come across as that this is our strategy and that's why we need you, it doesn't mean that our approach is that way. You know, it's more like engaging and maintaining the friendships and building the networks and the circles, rather than, okay, here is the vanguard, it's in New Delhi, and all of you out there are like outposts, and you're going to work for us and build the empire for us. It's not that kind of an approach. I would call the Chinese approach is like that. And, you know, many of the Chinese diaspora have been involved in spying for China in their countries, wherever they're domiciled. And many of them have been arrested and expelled, and it's quite ugly, especially with industrial espionage and stealing of economic secrets and scientific know-how in laboratories and all those things. So we don't do that, and we never encourage our diaspora to do such things for us. So our approach is softer, and I believe that it'll remain different, because India is a democracy, and, you know, there's a lot of dissent within the country. There's no single nerve center or power center that says I need this to happen, and, you know, that's how everything works. The power is more diffuse and diverse. So I think the nature of the Chinese state, China also says it's a civilizational state, and India also says we are a civilizational state. But there is a saying that India has always been a civilization without a state. And there is a saying that China has always been a state without necessarily having a commensurate civilization. I mean, I don't want to get into these cliches. What I'm trying to say is that there is no absolutist state in India. It's a great democracy. So it will presumably behave differently than the Chinese do with the diaspora. Yeah, can we take one or two more? Please.
Yes, thank you. My name is Shailisro Ramdin. I'm from Suriname. I have a question. I've already asked this also at the Ministry of External Affairs, and I want to ask you to get your view on this topic. As you have explained, one of the important parts of us as diaspora is the culture. Culture can be divided variously. So by rituals, by the foods prepared by us, by the clothing, and also by language. And in Suriname, the problem we are seeing now is that the new generations, there's a decline of the youth wanting to learn or speak or write Hindi. They rather like take other languages like French, German, which they find more interesting. So, what is your view on the fact that Hindi should be promoted? Because recently, the last ambassador we had in Suriname from India, I've met him numerous times at events, and he always proposited that let's see more of Hindi because, like in, for instance, in Suriname and I think other parts in the world, the Chinese, wherever they go, if they have like a shop, they put their name in Chinese and eventual in English or Dutch or something. And he kept asking us, why don't we do that with Hindi? That if it's seen more, there is maybe more interest in doing. So what is your intake on having the Hindi language within the diaspora for the coming generation? Because I don't think I would like to call myself an Indian diaspora and I don't know the language, for instance.
Yeah, I think, see, diaspora's strength is also its weakness. It's an oxymoron. They're very adaptable and flexible, right? And they easily blend into the local milieu wherever they are. They're not very, I would say, rigid and assertive about their own identity, and they take along everybody. Indian diaspora, historically and for cultural reasons, is like that. We're very open and absorb. We co-opt and absorb. We don't exclude anybody. So, as a result of it, what has happened is they probably blend in and assimilate to a greater extent than other communities. And that is their strength, and that's how you have all these, people of Indian origin rising to the top in business and politics in your countries, because they're accepted by other ethnic groups also. They often transcend ethnic divisions. They have this pan ethnic appeal. So, in the process, what happens, I think, is at some level they do have to dilute some of their Indianness and to not wear it so much on their sleeves. I mean, you look at one of the very famous examples, the vice president of the United States. Kamala Harris is half Indian by origin. Her mother is from Tamil Nadu. I think her name is Gopalan or something, if I'm not wrong. So, but she doesn't, because in the US system, the people of Indian origin are influential and are growing. But when she was making a career in politics, public life, going back like last 20 years, she didn't emphasize her Indianness much. And even today, she's better known as belonging to the Caribbean side of her, the Afro-Caribbean side of her family than the Indian side. And although there was a lot of, hype about her Indianness when she was made the vice president and Biden selected her to be her running mate here in India, she, unlike, let's say, Rishi Sunak, who's like very, very upfront and he doesn't beat around the bush about his Indianness and his Hindu background and all that. But Kamala Harris has not been that way. So I think it depends on context, and many times the diaspora, from my reading, try to find their own balance as to how Indian they should be and in what context. And in the process, if they are losing the vernacular, it's a matter of concern. And if our embassies and high commissions can do more to promote, for example, just, support Hindi language teaching in the local schools and subsidize and bring a teacher from India. One of the things we have lacked, and I've been pushing that, and we haven't yet achieved, is something like the Peace Corps. Like what the US government has worldwide, where there are young people who go and work in developing countries, sponsored by the US government, and who teach in local schools mathematics and English and science and all these things. And in the process, they accumulate soft power for the US on the ground, in many countries. We don't have that kind of like a Peace Corps kind of a thing for India yet. I've given some ideas. I've framed something called Volunteers for India Abroad, VIA. It's yet to see the light of day. So we do a lot of these long distance training and sessions, but we don't have in person a core of, like, say, a 500 or 1,000 young people who are well trained, people like Vanshika, for example, with a master's degree from a top Indian university, who could be like sent out, to diaspora countries or generally developing countries where they could teach a language, an Indian language, or the Chinese did that through their Confucius institutes and all that. In some countries, we have chairs in universities promoting Indian languages and all that, but it's not very systematic, and certainly it doesn't go to the school level, So our Prime Minister highlights some of the examples of people who are teaching Hindi or broadcasting in Hindi in faraway countries, who are like Indophiles. And they could be local people, they're not necessarily from India. And there are such examples that keep coming up, but it's not a very systematic way. It's like, matter of chance that somebody is taken to the language and is promoting the language in a big way. I can't remember, was it Mali or there's some West African country where there is this gentleman who's been teaching Hindi and who runs a radio show in Hindi. And the Prime Minister has promoted him in a big way in his radio show called Man Ki Baat. There are many such examples of people who promote the Indian vernacular languages abroad, but mainly out of their own initiative. It's not like a very organized or an institutionalized arrangement based on a strategy. So maybe we need that, It'll be fun if we have, few Indian teachers on the ground in some of the diaspora countries who are just helping not only to teach yoga, but also to teach about Indian civilization, values, culture, our language, and such things, directly to young people on the ground in the classrooms. Thank you so much.